It's an honor to be here, and I feel like I always start off clumsy, but I have faith that eventually I'll find my way through this. And I want to welcome everyone who's online. And the thought occurred to me, so hang on, time out. This is being recorded. That means that, someone might listen to this next week or in 2 months, and I've always wanted to be a time traveler. And the thought that I now get to travel through time. It's going to places I'll never know. Divine masculinity. My partner River and I were talking about the inspiration for this talk. And, goodness sakes, I don't know if I had ever considered the idea that the masculine could be divine. In a lot of ways, we look, like for instance, right now, at this point in time, the world's wealth is held within about 1% of the population, and most of those are men, and they don't want to share. When we talk about war, when we talk about greed, a lot of that's, revolving around men. And I thought, do we have any really good examples of what the divine masculine can be? I grew up, watching Dirty Harry and John Wayne, and the idea of what a man could be, sort of got lost. And what the idea of divine masculinity, have we even really had a conversation about it? What is there for us to aspire to being that? And this has been rolling through my mind and part of my thoughts. And just the idea of masculine, like for instance, I thought, well, for a father or for, a strong masculine presence, we would want that to be a safe presence to be. We would want that to be, nurturing and strong. And we also like the idea that if things went down or if things went bad, that our father or that masculine presence could, tear some shit up and kick some ass if they needed to. In all seriousness. And then you could apply the same things to the feminine. This is where I kept, what can I apply to the masculine that doesn't apply? Because I would want a mother who was strong and supportive and kind, and who also could take a stand if she needed to and tear some shit up if she needed to. Yeah. So, and the idea, we live in this polarity of light and dark, male and female, up and down. We live in this polarity of yin and yang, and within each one of us dwells masculine and feminine. I remember I became a dad, a single dad with 2 sons. They were 2 and 3 years old. They were 14 months apart. And in a lot of ways, I had to become a mother and got to, learn, what the whole nurturing, do the best I can with the whole nurturing thing. And we've had kind of a warped perception of what a good man is. And so I remember, growing up in this zeitgeist of our American culture, watching The Simpsons. And, you have Bart Simpson's, okay? But now when I look back, I see Ned Flanders as being a ninja Jedi, divine masculine man. Ned was there, happy-go-lucky, taking care of his family. His kids loved him. They went on cool vacations. And he was the one who was constantly made fun of. Yeah. And yet he was the one living a beautiful life with a healthy family. I would rather be Ned Flanders. And I think about, so when I'm talking now, I'm not saying it's exclusively what we say as being a male, because it applies to both of us. We all have the male and the female inside of us now. But what I'm talking about is our idea of what being a man is as handed down to us by our culture. And I think about my dad, and I loved my dad. My dad had his flaws and his faults, but I loved my dad. And in his paradigm of what being a man was meant you couldn't be wrong, you couldn't admit defeat, you couldn't own your mistakes or make apologies, you couldn't talk about your feelings, you couldn't emote. And I was certainly raised in that mold. I remember, it was about 5 or 6 years old when I was not allowed to cry anymore. I'm still a tender-hearted man, and I was a tender-hearted boy, and I remember hating myself when I wanted to cry. It was like I hated myself. I remember learning to build self-esteem by being better than other people, especially in the sense of competition. And a funny story about competition, when I had to go live with my sister and my brother-in-law, me and my younger brother did, and my sister would cook, and she had 4 kids at the time, 4 little kids, and me and my brother are in our early teens. And we go to live with my older sister. And man, she would cook, she would bake, she would cook, and there would just be a mountain of dishes. And the deal they had was my brother-in-law would do the dishes and she would cook. And he didn't want to do the dishes, and we had a ping pong table in the garage. And so after dinner, we would play ping pong and the loser would have to do dishes. And so we're playing ping pong, and so I would do dishes till the next game was over, and then I would go play my brother-in-law, who would smoke us game after game after game. And after a while, I got better at ping pong, and I really didn't want to do dishes. And I became a gifted ping pong player. But I remember, later in life in sports, I was always pretty good at sports. I was never great, but I was always a little bit better than average. And I remember, beating people and have people just completely lose their stuff over being beaten, to the point where it's like, is it really that is valuable to me? And to feed my self-esteem off in a predatory way. And the way guys are, the way we've learned to be, you're always trying to be better than someone else, or knocking someone down, or making someone feel stupid. In the 80s, that was like a skill. It was called a burn. And you were skilled at finding something about someone you can make them feel small so that you would feel a little bit better. And that's a two-edged sword, because there's always going to be someone better than you. And I'm online, I scroll online, I see there's all this stuff about being alpha. People want to be alpha. Men want to be alpha. They're always trying to prove their alphaness. And I was trying to think about, what is a healthy masculinity? What is healthy alpha? And do we really have something to aspire to as men in this society? The idea of competition and that predatory way to source one's self-esteem. Our species, we human beings, have not elevated to this level of technological advancement or this level of scientific prowess through competition. We got here by sharing knowledge. We got here by providing support for each other. Society has grown because of that. The idea that we need competition as a society to succeed is a myth. And it's a myth that's been used to keep us divided from each other, to keep us from really coming together. This is a side point, but it's coming through me right now, is the idea that the Earth's natural resources do not belong to corporations. They're not there to be made a scarcity. So I was trying to think of, what are some statements that would be true alpha? What are some statements that would be divinely masculine? And these have come to me slowly as I've considered that there's more than winning. There's more than trying to look better than someone else. And I thought about this. It's like the idea that I'm so alpha, right, to be divinely masculine would mean that there's no victory for me in someone else's defeat. There's no defeat for me in someone else's victory. I am only winning when everyone around me feels safe. And I thought about, especially as a dad, I'm winning when the kids are happy. I'm winning when everything's flourishing around me. It's as if to say, in my perception, and I'm free to change my mind, but if I'm a piece of lattice work, just imagine lattice work, and all the people in my sphere of influence, or all the people in my community, can see me as a place to grow on. The kids can see me as a safe place to flourish. That victory in my manhood means people feel safe around me. People feel supported around me. And then my victory is how everyone can grow, how everyone can flourish. For each of us men living in this society, the real work starts from the inside out. The idea that there is a divine masculine, to me, is revolutionary. The idea that I can stand in my masculinity and I don't have to cast any shadows. I don't have to prove anything. And what I'm finding out in a lot of ways is I just have to show up. Show up and be supportive. Show up and be present. Show up and pay attention. And for any fathers out there, it can be intimidating to be a father, but really, to put this in common American English, dude, bro, all you have to do is show up, care a little bit, and try not to be a dick, and everything will be okay. The bar is set pretty low. And I do believe that we men have been systematically dismantled in a lot of ways. You know, I recall, especially in the 70s, you know, being a little kid in the 70s, and this is kind of a poignant story, but I was like 8 years old, and goodness sakes, we were in a shelter, my mom and my brother and I, and there was a shelter for women who had experienced domestic violence. And we had, my mom and my brother and I had a bed in a hallway because it was overcrowded. And there was a woman who had been, you know, sadistically abused. She had been really hurt. And I just remember accidentally walking into this room, and she looked up at me and she said, "Man," like just because I was male, I was the devil. And then feeling like for a long time that I had to apologize for that. But to be able to own our masculinity in a healthy, compassionate way that is still strong can be somewhat of a challenge. And so ideas for us as men to grow into this. You know, we have the rest of our lives to do this. And by doing this, we're giving our sons and younger men permission to do so also. But to examine what a healthy self-esteem is. You know, how do we know when we're winning? Some signposts for that is people feel free to talk to you. There was a time, believe it or not, and sometimes I don't realize, I've come light years in this one lifetime. I feel like if I died today, this life would be a success. But I was raised that when I walked into a room, the first thing I did was to size every man up. You know, to stand up. You know, I got to assert dominance, but the idea of walking in and greeting people like I have nothing to hide, nothing to prove, then opens the door for everyone else to be open. You know, how free do people feel to talk to us? And do we consider that a victory? Like if someone is open and willing to talk to you as a man, do you see that as being a victory? Well, it is. The idea of shame. We as men and we as human beings, have we thought about that? How much shame we carry? Have we thought about the concept of setting ourselves free from that? Even to be willing to listen to our thoughts and to feel our feelings. Feeling my feelings is something I'm still new to. You know, I'm still going through that. And to feel my feelings without projecting them onto my partner, or onto traffic, or onto the government, or onto whoever it is around me. There have been times where I'm feeling big feelings and all you have to do is be in my general proximity and it's your fault. But to be able to feel our feelings and not need to do anything about it, but just to feel it, you know, what do you have to teach me? To own our feelings. Being willing to admit wrongs. You know, I got to get sober at 43 and work the steps. And in the steps, part of it is the fourth step is you're kind of writing down, you know, all the injuries, all the traumas, all the things you feel guilty about, and writing them down. You know, I'm writing like, you know, being beaten up, you know, being deserted, or times when I had let people down, or times when I had lied. You know, to write this down and to look at my childhood and my family of origin was the first time I looked at myself and like, wow, you poor baby. Goodness sakes. And began to have compassion for myself and to begin that kind of healing. And then to own those mistakes and make amends. Some of those amends were really hard to make. Some of them were for my own sons. Because, you know, I know I did my best. I tried my best. I can stand here and say, dude, I did the best I could with what I had, but I still passed down unhealthy ideas, unhealthy belief systems. And part of my way of making amends with my sons was to spend some time with them and just like hold that space and hope they would talk to me. And I remember trying to talk to my dad about that. He wasn't even willing to go there. All he had to say was, you didn't have it nearly as hard as a child as I did. And that's true. But all I really wanted was to be able to talk about it. And he couldn't do that. And I remember when my son started bringing me up, that voice came and it's like, dude, you don't even know. You don't even know what a tough childhood is. But I didn't. I was willing to own my mistakes, and I got to hear him talk about times when I hurt his feelings, times when I let him down. And it was hard for me to do that, but I did. And all I could say to him was, I love you so much. I wish I could have done better. You deserved better. I wish I could have been there in a different way for you. And where I'm at now in my manhood, that is stronger than saying, you don't have any right to bitch. Or I don't want to talk about it. To be able to look someone in the eye and say, I'm sorry, I was at fault for this. And not really expect them to say, well, okay, well, I'm sorry too. But just say, I'm going to own my part in this. And that's bigger than being a man. As women, you need to do that. I hate saying you, but I'm saying as a human being, to grow into this different place and being a human where it's not predatory, it's not egotistical, it's sincere. We give everyone else permission to be sincere. We present an example of a different way of being. Being willing to take a stand. Another icon or another archetype of manhood that I've always really loved and even wanted to emulate. For some reason, it's embarrassing for me to say that I want to emulate someone else. Is Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. Because he was compassionate. He was trying to bring everyone else up, trying to instill faith and courage in others. And he could still tear some shit up when he needed to. And I would love to think that, we will evolve into this place where violence and ego and might makes right will disappear. It may not happen. It may not happen. All I can do is in my life, what do I want to own? What do I want to be? There will always be barbarians at the gates. There will always be people who are lost in their morass of drama. There will always be people willing to be violent. But to be in this divine masculine means as a father, we're willing to throw down over our family. We're willing to push through and suffer to provide for our families. We're willing to sacrifice to protect and help our families feel safe, our communities feel safe. That day may call for us where we make a stand. It may be to protect someone in our community. It may be even to stand up against the government. I feel like the true sacredness comes from the inside out. It doesn't belong to institutions. It belongs to us. But to be willing to know that, to admit that to one's own self, that I'm willing to throw down for my family, that I'm willing to hurt and suffer for my family. In a lot of ways, I see that as being part of this divine masculine, and I'm still talking about it, still thinking about it. But that willingness to do that is important to me as a man. And I think it's something that needs to be talked about. And the same thing goes for the women among us too, is to show up like that. I had a beautiful experience, so hang on, time out. I'm still working through a lot of my programming that I don't really appreciate anymore. It's like written in there. And I went to a festival a couple of weeks ago, and there was a men's circle. I was willing to go to this men's circle, because I believe in this. And I go to this men's circle, and we're standing in a circle. And in the back of my mind, I just have that whole thing of, this is stupid. These guys are going to start crying. They're going to start talking about like poison going. But I've learned to be willing, even in spite of myself. And in the circle, we're standing in the circle, and there's a fire going in the middle. And he asks us, he says, okay, everyone, go into the forest and find a pine cone. So we all go find a pine cone. And he says, one by one, I would like every man in the circle to step forward to the fire and say your father's name out loud, and say your grandfather's name out loud if you know it, and say your mother's father's name out loud, and throw the pine cone into the fire, and let's honor the men in our lives. And we all did this one by one. And then he asked, what were the things about your father that you learned the most from, that you appreciate the most from? And we talked about the things that we appreciated. And then he asked, what were the things about our father that we feel they suffered with, or the burdens they carried? And we talked about that too. And then he asked us to pair up. So we paired up. I was with a gentleman named James. And he says, okay, we're going to do some role playing. And this is where the voices are coming up, they're coming up with this. And the thing was, we took turns. So I was the son first. And I tell my partner, James, what do you wish you could have heard from your dad? And for me to even admit that there's something, like I have lived most of my life in spite of my father. And I love my dad, but in spite. Because I deserve better, man. I deserve someone who cared, checked in on me, wanted me to succeed. And I felt like I did a lot of things in spite of that. Like I was going to be a success, goddammit, no matter what. I was going to win in life no matter what, almost in spite of my father. And so for me to say, I really wanted my dad to say, I'll never leave you. I really wanted my dad to say, I'm proud of you. And so in spite of myself, I said this to him. And the thing was, you had to look the person in the eye. And that's kind of hard to do, to be comfortable looking at someone in the eye. I was willing to do it. And he looked me in the eye. And the thing was for a couple minutes, he said, I will never leave you. I'm proud of you. And I still, to this day, cannot let myself cry. It takes a family member dying or something to cry. I'll get there. But I remember as he was saying this to me, I wanted to receive it, but man, mostly I could just feel animosity. But I was willing to look him in the eye and hear that. And then it was my turn to say this to him. And his was, you're enough, and I love you. His dad had never said, I love you. And I was willing to look him into the window of the soul and say over and over again, you're enough, I love you. And I'm a dad. I'm a daddy. And I love being a dad. Being a dad is the most precious, beautiful love ever. And I looked at him, and I saw the child in him, and I just said, you are enough. I love you. You are enough. I love you. And as I said that, and I thought about my relationship with my kids, and I saw the little boy in him, I meant it. You are enough. I love you. And I got to watch this man break down and cry. And I got to hold him, and the group held him. And we walked away from that better men. We walked away from that with open hearts. So as your attorney, as the men in this room, I invite you to begin to feel your feelings, to know that you are enough right now, that you're worthy right now, that you can make a difference in this life just by showing up, whether it's at the convenience store or a men's circle or Unity or whatever it is, just with an open heart, to let down your guard. You have nothing to prove. You have nothing to hide. We are flawed human beings who have made mistakes, and we are also precious jewels of a loving cosmos. And we're here for more than just eating, sleeping, paying taxes, and buying stuff. We're worthy of more than that. And I invite you just to consider it, just to step into it. Set yourself free. You're worthy of nothing less than that. And there is a divine masculine. We're discovering it together. I believe we had it at one time. I believe I think, through the Industrial Revolution and war, it was beaten out of us. But it's a time for us to discover it again. And we're worthy of nothing less than that. And I wish you all the best.